Welcome, everyone, to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, Beyond Patriarchal Sex, a place for both women and men to elevate ourselves, finding out what it takes to live beyond our conditioning and assumptions, not only for ourselves, but also for the coming generations. My name is Dévashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these conversations. Welcome back, everyone. I'm adding an unscheduled solo episode here because of some conversations that have happened since episode 12 and people sharing with me their experiences around money and relationships. And when it's been a friend reaching out to me, I have responded and elaborated more and was suggested by a few of them that why not add these other things that I've also said onto the podcast? And in terms of reaching out to me about what you hear, a new way of doing that has been added. And I'll mention how to go about that at the end. And because whether you just want to share your experience, especially from your culture, or how it happens in your country, because it does differ from country to country. And also something you want to understand more, you have a question, you want to ask more, you want to say that you aren't sure about something you've heard because of XYZ, you don't agree, it's all welcome. So there's now going to be a way of you doing that in addition to commenting on the actual episodes, say on Spotify or on Apple, you're allowed to comment on episodes. You can also write something in a review. That's also a way to respond. There's also a Facebook community group, but I see that people aren't really using that. And so I wanted to add a different alternative so that you can keep the conversation alive, maybe even while you're listening or afterwards. And that way you can feel like you're involved in the conversation. So, in elaborating on the conversation from episode 12, I want to highlight what is equitable rather than equal when it comes to finances in relationship, because actually there is no equality really from an embodied level with men and women. There just isn't, and it especially doesn't exist for mothers because there is no equivalent a man can bring that compares to pregnancy, to birth, and to creating a human being out of her vagina, no less. Nature isn't fair. It's not equal. It just is what it is. So know that in this episode here, I will be speaking of norms. So there's always going to be exceptions to norms. And that means you might not identify with everything that's said totally, but it gives a baseline, and it is assuming that I'm talking about self-aware women as well. And I personally come from a culture where 50-50 finances are assumed. Like that's, of course, it's how it will be. People don't even discuss it. It's so expected. And in the Australian culture on a whole, uh, women are not relaxed. They're not restored in their feminine energy. They're living out of their bodies. They're in their head. They're in doing mode, over masculinized, over functioning. They don't feel taken care of. They are functioning like a man. And the female body is not designed to work in the way that a man can. It is way more depleting for the female body to constantly override its natural rhythm and cycle to keep participating in a 24/7 mode, in a 9 to 5 mode. And so my perspectives here, I want to say they're not actually conceptual, it's somatic. It's based on nervous system wisdom. It's based on women's mysteries, both the physical and esoteric of that. And so, yeah, this is different to a past version of feminism. I would say this is an embodied version of feminism, an evolution of feminism. So I didn't arrive at these ideas through thought. It came through lived experience, through living in an embodied way to be able to know these things that are true, not just from my own experience, but also from witnessing the journey of thousands of other women over the last more than 2 decades. So it is more expensive to be a woman. This is something that I think a lot of people do not consider. They don't think about it, including women. So let me say some of the basics. Sanitary products, they are taxed. We have our whole life of paying for this. We have fertility products that can start at a young age. And then there's emergency fertility situations that way too often women are paying for. And there's this stress that's carried in her body by constantly thinking about her fertility, managing it, being responsible for it. There's a level of stress involved in that that a man will never know because it so directly, acutely impacts the woman, and her female body goes through so much with fertility that he literally does not even need to think about once. And she's got that her whole life. And also health supplements to do with feminine health in particular, hormones. At a certain point, that's also a lot to think about and another expense. Skincare products. Of course, there's a minimal version of these things that I'm about to say and a maximized version, depending on how extravagant someone wants to be. But even a minimal level of skincare products, it's much more than a man would need to do and is paying, right? And hair care, service products, this is kind of expensive. And a minimal level is still more expensive than what a man would pay. For example, when I go to the hair salon in Bali, it costs me around $100, but I know that in a Western country, it can be more like 300 to 500 for one visit. And this is a cut and color. Men are never going to pay that much. And then there's makeup and nails, which, are kind of optional things, but there's still a minimal level and a lifetime of it that women pay for that men usually do not in this same way, not at this level. And other beauty treatments, which again can be seen as optional, but actually awareness of beauty and presentation, it's just way more consuming in the female experience and expected that a woman would attend to that and pay for all of that, right? And all of this that's mentioned takes quite a lot of time, and time can equivalent be the equivalent of money here as well. And when it comes to women's clothing, even someone who's not style conscious, should we say, is a woman is still going to pay much more for basic clothing. I mean, who wants basic clothing? But it's more expensive to for a woman to take care of her wardrobe. And the fact that women's bodies, we are shapeshifters, quite literally, physically. And so clothing really varies in what can fit her over time, whereas that is much less changeable for a man. And then there's the being taken advantage of and ripped off because of being a female, which happens with various services in the world. And there's being security conscious and thinking about transport safety. Maybe it's not actually safe for her to take a train home, or, she needs to pay for a car, a taxi, whatever. There's things that women have to do and think about and pay for that just don't really factor in the same way for a man. And then there is the invisible labor that a woman brings. And I'm intentionally not just saying emotional labor because it's spiritual as well. And then in a lot of occupations, men get paid more. There's the wage gap. And so when considering all of these things, which I think people do not really think about at all, and they just assume that financial 50-50 is fair when it never actually is. When taking all of this into consideration, I'm not suggesting to a man should be thinking, well, a woman's life is more expensive, so why do I have to compensate her for that? But it's not about that. I always recommend whether man or woman to be and to come from an empowered position. So it's not about trying to help her out. It's not about trying to compensate her for the reality that her basic living needs are more expensive than his. It's about coming from the empowered position of what can I offer to take some burden and pressure and stress off of her because I can, because I want to, because I want her to have that effect from being with me. This would be an empowered way of thinking about it for a man. And I don't know if you've seen this, but there are couples that have worked out all the labor that a woman who stays at home and apparently doesn't work, but does all of the labor in the home and for the family and for him behind the scenes. This is a lot of different jobs at once. So for women that have that lifestyle of being a stay-at-home mother, wife, if all of that is calculated, if all of her tasks that she does has a monetary value, people have actually taken the time to add all of that up properly. And it actually comes to a fairly high wage of like 200K or more a year. And so when considering that, there are things that people who are financially positioned to do so add onto this situation where they're not just acknowledging the value that a woman is bringing in her so-called not working. They are giving her some equity in the company that he has. They are making sure that she's being paid like a superannuation so that if anything happened, she would know that she has that financial security, which makes her feel and be in an empowered position in the relationship. So these are obviously couples who want that traditional relationship paradigm and it works for them. They both are mutually wanting that. But instead of the woman being on the back foot and having to ask for money, it's such a ridiculous situation to me that a woman should ever have to ask permission to buy tampons or whatever it is. This should never be the case. So there are couples doing something which I consider is pretty evolutionary in the culture, which is giving her some stake in the company, giving her an actual wage coming in. She would never have to ask for money. She can use that when she wants and for what she wants, while being totally attentive to her roles. And at the same time, she has financial security and she knows that. And so she's never in a disempowered position. She's never staying there because she has to. She's doing all of this because that's what she wants for her life. And she's being valued for it in a way that's, um, you know, truly equitable, but at the same time, it's above and beyond what most people do. And so it comes down to these things like, for a man, do you want her to feel grateful for you and attracted for you ongoingly over time? Do you want her to feel receptive to you? Or do you want a woman to feel burdened by all the invisible labor that she will inevitably bring in the relationship, especially if added to this, if she's having patriarchal sex as the norm? Do you want her to feel like she might as well have a housemate that she's going 50-50 with instead of putting up with all of that bullshit. This is really what it comes down to. Is she better off not in a relationship if her life isn't improving and becoming easier somehow because you are in it? If you want a woman's love and affection and attention on you, what are you providing to take the pressure off of her so that she so genuinely, enthusiastically, authentically wants to give you that love, affection, and attention ongoingly over time? Or might she be better off without you? These are very real questions that I'm putting forward that are just as much for the women as for the men. And actually, I have a theory that some men are more aware of a woman's value than she is because women are really conditioned to be blind to their impact, to their presence, and what that actually gives to a man. And so men can take advantage of that, supported by a whole culture around their relationship of patriarchy that doesn't really care about the female experience. It doesn't factor that into things. And so then there's a male entitlement that can come to feel justified in consuming her and her energy, and then wondering why she ends up resenting you. Like, this should not be a surprise. What a woman does invisibly with her womb, aside from children, is constant. The way she creates a life for you both, the atmosphere that pours into the intimacy and maintains the connectedness and holds the way a woman holds a man emotionally, balancing him, healing him. And most men admit that a woman's presence is healing and restorative. So when that energy is fixated on him as one person, this is an enormous amount of life source power, energy that she's happily extending and spending, actually constantly breathing life into him. And then there's all the invisible labor, like I said, which is not just emotional, it's also spiritual. It's where women are more attuned to emotions and subtle energies, and she will tend to notice things first. She's so hyper aware of little things in the relational field, inside the partnership, that a lot of times, at least, and yes, there are exceptions, men are just not even aware at all. And this, if unacknowledged, if unappreciated, if she's not feeling held, will most definitely become a burdensome feeling to her. It really will. And I want to say, along with side that some women are quite annoying in that they're irresponsible with their emotions. And so that's maybe one of the exceptions that I mentioned, from the start, that this all relates to a more self-aware woman. But when it comes to a woman where she is being irresponsible with her emotions, I understand that this is a real thing and this does happen. But if it is happening, you've got to think about, is she just unskilled in communicating? Is she just so overwhelmed by all the invisible labor and doesn't know how else to discharge their energy through anything other than complaint and resentment? Because resentment from a woman is not random, truly. Love is her natural state. And if that's not what you're getting from her, something is amiss here. And yes, women bring trauma from before if that's where she's at. So, you know, either way, for a man or woman, it can come back to perhaps you need higher standards for what you are allowing and accepting in your life and who. But truly, a woman, when she is a good person, when she is willing to work in harmony with you for the most part, but she is complaining a lot and she is being really resentful, she probably just doesn't know what to do with all of what she's bringing, that she does not feel any kind of equity holding of her in. Okay. And some questions for the women, if her life is not improving because you're in it, what is she doing with you? Why is she there? Because a woman is not a resource to consume. That will deplete her. It will definitely make you feel, as a man, unappreciated. When she feels depleted, this is a recipe for disaster, for suffering. You can expect that that will be the outcome and not be surprised. So many complacent attitudes in relationship normalize this conflict and typical things that people experience. But actually, this doesn't need to be typical. If you just come into the understanding, especially from an embodied perspective of why these things happen in the first place, you don't have to deal with them constantly. So if there is an expectation of 50-50 finances and there's patriarchal sex happening, this is a terrible situation. This should be no deal. This should not be the norm. This should not be happening. This is not going to benefit in the long run either the man or the woman, where he's using her body to regulate his nervous system. This is where it's definitely the case. There needs to be some aiming higher. There needs to be some standards in place instead. And I want to say that in the list of things that I mentioned before of how much more expensive it is to be a woman, and I didn't even go through and make a number on all of those things, but you could, and you will see as an actual financial amount that this, for the woman that you're with, for the type of woman that she is, extravagant or not extravagant, this will be a very large difference. So remembering that this is the conversation needs to be more around equity than equality in terms of survival living expenses cut down the middle. That would be the financial 50-50. So yes, even a minimal level of financial equity is going to make a big difference to a woman's life. The minimal level being survival living expenses, right? And you get to decide, obviously, what that means exactly. Like, does it mean rent and food and eating out and utilities and car transport, or more than that or less than that? Every couple gets to work that out for themselves. What is living expenses compared to, the difference of the female expenses? And what decisions do you want to make around that for yourself as a woman? What are you willing to provide as a man? What is your position around that? So I want to mention as well, there is a sense of entitlement, a growing sense of entitlement in the younger generation. And this is, someone reached out to me after episode 12 and explained to me how common this is becoming in America, especially, and how it really sets up men to fail, and it can set women up to be in really disempowered positions with trad husbands, basically, because they're not seeing it all in context. They're just probably mixing their resentment, ancestral resentment and wounds, actually, with a sense of empowerment and not realizing that they're doing that. So they're just coming at it from the start with this norm of a high level of entitlement, wanting the man to pay for absolutely everything, everything. And the reality is that that may work in some situations, but most men are not financially positioned to cover absolutely everything for the woman. And so it's a sign of respect to know someone's capacity financially and to not constantly expect more if they're not able to offer that, because that's a path to guaranteed suffering. He will never feel like he's enough, and that's a terrible thing to do to a man, to set him up to fail. It's important to figure out in the beginning, where is your standard, where is your expectation, what is what you want now, what is what you're aiming for, and vice versa, and is that a match, and because unfortunately, it is the case that in romantic relationship, love isn't really enough. There needs to be lifestyle alignment for it to be practical. Because as much as people might really, really deeply love each other, we are living in a practical, physical, human reality at the same time. And we are living in capitalism, and uh, it's stressful. And so everyone needs to know what is their level of stress that they can carry, that they are aiming for, that they want and don't want, and what is right for them, what path are they on. And for a woman, without gauging where that is, and instead just resenting him and expecting him to be someone other than he is, this is just you not taking the time to notice who he is and where he's at, and disrespecting him instead of respecting yourself and the quality of relationship that you want, and making sure that you're allowing a man to win with you, right? So, what I want to say towards the end here is try out the embodied approach, because the more you come into yourself as a woman, the more you come into your body, and the more you do also as a man, the more you appreciate that a woman is living that way if she's with you, then if you do this in the embodied way, which is more about equity than financial equality, you will see a difference. And I'm curious what you would notice that difference being, and the impact that it has on the connection. Because as I've said already here, the 50-50 financial equality, supposed equality, is definitely going to burden a woman, because that equality that you think in your mind doesn't actually exist in the embodied physical reality. There is no way around it. And I heard from a woman in my community recently that she um, has massively increased the quality of life for her and her partner, the quality of pleasure, the amount of intimacy that they're experiencing. And this is because of all her investments in her education and her embodiment, and coming out of her stress and her overworking into a place of being replenished, and not only restored from depletion, but flourishing in her embodied feminine presence and energy. So she's bringing a quality of life to the relationship that neither of them have ever had before. And she's so focused on it at the moment that um, he's the one that's providing for their life. And so even without children, it can take a lot for a woman to open up new conversations, new level of agreements in her partnership. For example, like asking for a joint bank account where she can not have to ask for permission, and that they're already committed. They're already living together, and they've been together for over 10 years. They're already, life partners. So um, these are new thresholds for women to face when it comes to living this in an embodied way rather than a conceptual way only. And there was no resistance in him. It was just like, of course, and because he values what she's bringing, he's um, not able to access that on his own. The kind of person he is, or the job that he has, it's not conducive to being able to tap into what she's bringing, and it's amplifying him as well. And there's another situation that I can share with you about, where another woman that's worked with me has brought really deep awareness of emotion and human relating and nervous system awareness to her husband, and it's helped him so much in his job to understand rather than be caught up in the drama or feel the stress of dramas at work, other people's emotional dramas, and just not knowing how to handle himself in certain situations. When he discussed some of the things that go on, she could help him place what was happening inside of these people so he could understand it in a way where his interaction then with it was a different level. He wasn't reacting, he was responding. He was able to change the dynamics of the workplace through all of this embodied awareness that she was living and bringing to him from the investments that she's made in herself and her growth and her evolution. And what that resulted in was a higher position for him in the company, more income. And so, what I want to say here is that there are unexpected and magical things that happen when a woman feels safe to embody her full feminine energy, financial outcomes that can't be predicted, because you have the element of the mystery, of the void, of the feminine principle, which increases everything. It adds to everything. It makes everything flourish. And these are things that people find out along the way that couldn't have been planned as such. And a woman needs to physically experience the current of receiving through her body, meaning she needs to be given to in a way that helps her to physically relax in her body and in her life. And for a man to, or for her to feel like a man is actually offering practical value in her life, this is what is going to make a difference down to the felt sense of her inner reality. It will take her out of the over masculinized mode, which does tend to be the default. And if she's not out of that mode, she will never experience the real feminine current that lives in her body, the primordial energy of her body. And he will never experience it either. Actually, many women have no idea how much pleasure and joy and love they're capable of feeling. It's covered up by so many burdens and stress and overwhelm that the female body and the hormonal system of a woman and the female energetic structure is not designed to process that amount of stress. And because of this, many men also have never experienced a woman's full energy and power either. So, from a grounded and embodied place, without entitlement, without all of the conceptual, trying to make up for things and demanding things, without all of that entitlement, just from a grounded, embodied place, what would be possible for you if you allowed, if you're a woman, yourself to come into a state of restoration and flourishing? What impact could that have? These are the beautiful, magical things that we cannot know from the start, just thinking about it, but it will come and it will add to your life in ways that you didn't even think of to ask. And for men, what would it take for you to come into a relationship with the feminine principle itself where you can trust that you can't do alone? And personally, money hasn't actually been a big issue in any of my personal relationships before. But I am more aware than ever before of these dynamics that sustain life and sustain and amplify feminine energy. And I'm interested to hear about this from the experiences of both men and women. And there's a new way that you can do that. We've added a voice note component to these episodes. And you will see it on this episode here underneath if you're looking at the show notes. And this is a way, like I said at the start, you can comment on the episode. You're still welcome to do that. If it's easier for you just to respond in the moment on this voice note app, you're welcome to do that. tell me about your experience. Tell me about something you want to hear more about. What do you want to have delved into more on these episodes moving forward? Do you have a perspective that you would like to bring and would like me to mention on this platform? Do you disagree with something? Feel free to share on the voice notes, and just know that it has a maximum 5-minute capacity. So if you can leave a message less than that, that would be great. And please know that it's not two ways. So I will likely not respond. This is just a way for you to add your contributions to the conversations. And that will be there moving forward with all of the episodes. So if it's easier for you to express yourself like that, please know that you're totally welcome. And I look forward to hearing from you. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please do share it around on social media. And know that everyone is invited to be part of our research in the anonymous survey. Your contribution will help reveal the exact ways men and women can live beyond patriarchal sex and find greater harmony together. You can find the link to our survey and also details on the Tigress Path for Women via thetigresspath.com.